Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is back on his affordability agenda, identifying issues that are frustrating for Canadians, linking them to government policies, and then laying the blame for the hardships squarely at the feet of the Prime Minister.
Policies that some people thought might reverse under Mark Carney, but in fact have worsened under his leadership. It is more drugs, more costs, more crises, more of the same under Mark Carney's Liberals. And nowhere is this more true than when it comes to food prices, which are in a total and absolute crisis. Prices are rising faster today than they were when Mark Carney took office, promising to lower them.
Okay, so this may be effective politics, but is it an accurate portrayal of why things are the way they are? Well, the Power Panel is here to talk about that and amongst other things. Vandana Cotter was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Cheryl Oates was Director of Communications for former Alberta NDP Premier Rachel Notley. And here with me in the studio, Tim Powers is a former strategist for Conservative parties, and Rob Russo is the Canada correspondent for The Economist. It's good to see you all. Rob, let's start with you. Food inflation is 3.5 was the year-over-year increase in August in Canada. 3.2 in the United States, higher, but not grotesquely out of line. What do you make of this line of attack? Because it used to be, if the consumer carbon tax went away, food prices will fall. Now it's the industrial carbon tax and a bunch of other things that need to go.
When you look at how elections are decided in the United States, it's gasoline and the price of groceries often determine who becomes president of the United States. So is this fruitful terrain for a political leader? Yes, it is. Let's not forget how Mr. Poilievre built really an unprecedented coalition for the Conservative Party in getting working Canadians to support the Conservatives for the first time in significant numbers in my memory. It is by going after bread and butter issues or tabletop issues in this instance. Now, there's the difference between feel and real, okay? It's like golf, right? It may feel like this is a serious problem, and it is a serious problem. It is. I mean, my mother will tell you that she cannot buy what she used to buy for the same thing. Is it a crisis? I think the sort of food instability situation is a real crisis. But when I listen to Mr. Poilievre describe what's happening in Canada in terms of other areas of the country, crime, for instance, you would think we're living in a dystopian hellscape. We are not. But is this an issue that is fertile terrain for him politically? Yes, it is.
Right. But, you know, Tim, to solve a problem, you have to identify its cause. And we were told for years that it was the consumer carbon tax that was driving up the price of food. That's been gone now since April 1, and food is still going up. I mean, we have had supply chains post-COVID. We have had the invasion of Ukraine. We've had bird flu, which wiped out, you know, so much chicken stock that drove up the price of egg, and drought, which affected cattle stock, which is now driving up the price of beef. These are global factors. These are every country. It is not the carbon price, and it's not the industrial carbon price by the analysis that you look at. So why highlight these if getting rid of them won't solve the problem you're saying it will fix?
Rarely has an opposition leader been determined to solve problems, but to point them out.
Right. But he is offering a prescription here, right?
Well,
to fix it.
His game of Clue comes up with the clue being choose me, and all of this may go away. And he's not alone in doing it.
Sure.
I mean, it's not unlike, I know we're going to talk about the 1990s soon, but it's not unlike Mr. Chrétien saying, I'm going to relieve your burden by getting rid of the GST. Then all of a sudden discovering the GST is a wonderful tax tool to pay for some of the programs that are necessary. So, you know, Mr. Poilievre's going over well-trodden ground, and I think he has a bit of an audience for it because what public opinion data is showing at the moment is it's the fall, people are feeling more anxious, kids are gone back to school, they're seeing expenses. So is it pure and true? No. But does it hit emotional buttons? Most certainly.
So, Vandana, I think it's fair to say the Liberals had a very difficult time pushing back against this kind of a focused, driven campaign when it came to the consumer carbon price, and now it's the industrial policy that is being taken aim at. It is in pursuit of lower food prices, but at least on its face. But if you break it all down, this is just the constant stripping away of any kind of an environmental policy here. So how does the Carney government respond to this latest salvo here?
Well, I think everything Prime Minister Carney has been doing so far has been about affordability. He's talked about the middle class tax cuts, everything for industry supports, worker supports, all of that is for affordability right now. I think what they need to do is connect it more in a tangible way for everyday consumers understand how it connects to having a stronger economy, how it affects to affordability. But I think Mr. Carney is already doing a lot of those things, but he has to do that in more niche detail. I see Mr. Poilievre is at a grocery store, having Prime Minister Carney also connecting with Canadians as well, and showcasing that all of these things he's doing to this point is because of affordability, I think is going to be important. That being said, things like affordability, they're complex. You mentioned a number of things that have caused the food crisis here and for prices to skyrocket. There's no on and off switch, right? So you have to help Canadians understand what you're doing to help inoculate them from this, but understand that these aren't quick fixes, but they're long-term projects, really.
Right, but Cheryl, I guess, if it's bird flu, if it's drought in other countries, if it's the cost of transportation, if it is labor costs in other places, and then the currency exchange, these are all things that are inputs into food prices that have nothing to do with domestic Canadian tax policy. So how do you make this argument? Because this is going to get reduced to a snappy little rejoinder here.
Yeah, I can imagine what it will be. I think this is actually, and I hate to say this, I think this is actually really smart opposition politics because, as we know, affordability has been at the top of what people care about in terms of priorities for a really long time across Canada. And when you ask people where the places they feel the most pain, groceries is also always near the top of the list. But the struggle for political parties is that it's a really tough problem to solve. Like, there just aren't that many levers to pull to make groceries cheaper. And so the Conservatives have come up with a plan. Is it an accurate plan? It's not an accurate plan, but they've come up with a plan to make grocery prices cheaper, and they feel like they can point to a solution, which, there's always the criticism that, like, okay, it's easy to criticize, but what's your solution? Poilievre now has a solution. Now, yes, we've made the case. This is about packaging policies. This is about carbon levies. This is about, international geopolitics. Are these changes going to make potatoes and ground beef cheaper tomorrow? They are absolutely not. But like I said, I think that most Canadians, this really does hit the things that they care about most.
Right, but Cheryl, you're in Alberta. You worked in the government of Alberta, which is kind of ground zero for opposition to a lot of the federal environmental policies. But Alberta does have a large emission trading system, as we call it, the industrial carbon price. And when Danielle Smith says get rid of it, she doesn't talk about food prices. She just talks about it kills the oil sands, right? I mean, I've never heard the premier of the largest oil-producing province link it to food.
No, because it's not directly linked to food. The problem here isn't industrial carbon pricing. The problem here is that Pierre Poilievre doesn't have a good answer to this question. Nobody has a great answer to this question. And so it's easy. They can reuse all their bumper stickers. They can reuse all their podium art. Let's just axe the tax. Let's just find any tax to axe. And so I don't think it matters that this is not a logical solution to grocery prices. It matters that it's easy for people to remember and that hundreds, if not thousands of people were already rallying behind this call.
So, Rob, what are the levers? If there's no lever the federal government can pull to make it cheaper, then the counter to that is there's no lever they push to make it more expensive.
Don't forget the ombudsman.
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, yes. Call him in for another meeting. But what do you do?
There are very few. But I would urge all governing political parties to ignore this issue at their peril.
Don't ignore it.
Let's not forget the Biden Democrats, who kept saying to Americans, things are actually pretty good. The stock market's at very new highs. We have full employment. And yet people kept saying, yeah, but my butter and orange juice costs more. And as I said, that is what decides elections in great swaths of the Western world. So you can't ignore it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to help the people most affected by it, and that means lower income Canadians. And it'll be interesting to see if the government does something like that in the next budget.
Right. So Tim, I guess what I'm wondering about is, don't ignore it. I mean, the inflation crisis is past, but the affordability crisis is not, right? Because all of those year-over-year baked-in price increases, they're still there. Just the rate of growth it's back into the target range for the bank. But you need to talk about it in a way that you can actually offer a solution that will actually deliver a result, do you not? Otherwise, we just end up, it becomes, as they say in political science terms, trash can policy. It's a solution in search of a problem, right?
It is. And one of the things the Carney government hasn't done, and it is tough to do as well, is link all of the time and energy they've spent on tariff relief, deals with the United States, traveling across Europe to establish trade relationships, which are all, look, I think the criticism of them traveling is nonsensical, but that's predictable opposition politics as well, and it plays well to a certain audience right now who feels like they don't have enough time. But I think the government has got to find a way to tell a story about what the big picture things it's doing impact you and why it's taking time to do it. You have to spend the time telling a story. They can't rush to the problem, as the joke about the grocery ombudsman that Justin Trudeau did. Philip F.P. Champagne was going to go out and he was going to rattle the knuckles of the grocers and make sure prices were down. We don't hear any more of that nonsense anymore because it doesn't work that way. But they have to look engaged. Maybe you use a communicator like Dominic LeBlanc, who is on the coalface of the trade issue, to say, hey, I'm working on this because it means that. It is not an easy argument to make, and Poilievre, to his credit, has connected particularly with younger audiences on the affordability issue for a long time, more with housing than anything else. You want to stop this advance, though, on food. You have to find a way to stop it on food. So you need to get your better communicators, and perhaps the Prime Minister himself, saying, this equals this. Even if it's not entirely true, that isn't encumbering Pierre Poilievre. He could look at a similar approach.
Right, but Vandana, Pierre Poilievre has rightly identified the frustration of younger Canadians, and the way the amount of wealth concentration in the boomers versus the millennials and Gen Zs, it's a staggering and frustrating ratio. But I guess you can't let grocers become the new housing, right? That
no
whether
way.
you have any real responsibility or control over it, you're going to wear it. So what's the play?
Well, I think what Tim's point is to address it head on. I mean, this is the reality of what's happening. I think where Mr. Poilievre has done is, again, as Cheryl said, axe the tax, and he makes it easy to get to those younger audiences through social media. I mean, most of my friends are saying they get their news from social media. So addressing it head on, having the Prime Minister, his caucus members, his cabinet all talking about this as if everything they're doing, which I believe they have been doing, has been for affordability. So we signed this trade agreement with Indonesia to make life more affordable for you. This Algoma steel, we're doing that to make life more affordable for you. We are putting supports into workers to make life more affordable for you. The more you put that in people's psyche, the more they at least have confidence that the government has their back and is working towards these. While they feel it or not, at least they will feel confident that, okay, they understand that butter is expensive. They understand that I'm clipping coupons. They understand that life is hard for me, but they have a plan, because the plan is complex. But they have a plan that seems credible, that will affect my daily life. And I think what they can also point to is Mr. Poilievre, all those options he's giving, none of them have any proof points that they affect the consumer, that they'll trickle down to the consumer. So I think litigating on that, but also showcasing what they're doing and connecting it directly to affordability would be the way to go.
So Cheryl, just to give you the last word on this before we switch topics, a lot of the things that Vandana pointed to there are things that the Carney government is doing, but these are medium to long-term economic restructuring, or it's kind of putting a floor under an industry that's getting hammered, right? It's not so much a cost of living agenda like through fee reduction. It's almost like emergency room medicine in some cases. So how do you connect the two?
Yeah, I wish there was an easy answer, because governments would be doing it everywhere. If there was an easy way to make groceries cheaper tomorrow, every government in Canada would be doing it. But there isn't. And that's why we find ourselves in this position. And that's why this opportunity is open for Poilievre to put forward a solution that doesn't actually make sense, but at least it's something. And I think that's where the government runs into some problems is, yes, you can absolutely litigate the ideas that Pierre Poilievre has put forward here and say there is no reason to suspect that this would actually make your groceries cheaper. But for most Canadians, they're going to say, okay, so what are you going to do? And that's a really, really hard question to answer for this government.
No, that is a really good point. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is making affordability one of his top agenda items, and he's placing the blame for the high cost of living on Prime Minister Mark Carney.
And it's not a global issue. It's not a foreign issue. It's a Mark Carney Liberal issue. Food prices are rising 48% faster in Canada than they are in the United States of America, and you can't blame tariffs, because American tariffs do not apply on food consumed here in Canada.
Well, the latest data from Statistics Canada shows food prices in Canada are rising, with Canada's food inflation last month at about 3.5%, compared to just 3.2% in the United States. For more on what's driving up the cost of food, I'm joined by Mike Van Massow, Associate Professor in Food Economics at the University of Guelph. Professor, good to see you again. Thanks for being here, sir.
Well, thanks for having me, David.
So higher in Canada than in the U.S., but only by 0.3 percentage points. Is that Mark Carney's fault? What do you make of what we just heard there?
Well, I think it's important to remember that the top line number is one thing, and it's a pool of many other things. So there are some things that are up and there are some things that are down. And I think looking at the specifics would suggest that this has very little to do with what the federal government is doing. As always, I think governments get more blame than they deserve, but also get more credit than they deserve when things go well.
So when you look at what's happening with food prices in Canada, is there something domestically that is causing the number to be higher here than in the United States, or is this a result of global inputs as it goes into it?
Well, the biggest thing that changed and is a contributor to that 3.9% is meat, particularly beef. It's really what's driving that. And that's a bit of a hangover, if you will, from extreme weather that we had a few years ago where it was dry in Western Canada and the Western US. As such, we didn't have enough feed. That means we reduced the cow herd. That takes a while to come back. And cows are really the engine or the factory of the beef industry. If we don't have enough cows, we don't have enough calves that turn into beef animals. And so it takes a while to rebuild that after good years, because that calf has to be born. She has to grow into a mature animal up to almost 2 years, then be bred, then carry that calf, so this takes a while. So beef is the big one. Pork has been up a little bit, likely because demand for beef is down. We saw a couple of other things. While Mr. Poilievre said tariffs aren't causing these prices to increase, the retaliatory tariffs that are off now did affect a couple of things specifically. Fruit juice, particularly fresh pressed orange juice. So there are some things, confection, coffee.
Yeah, so the beef one is interesting because that is the high number. It's like 3.5 in Canada, 3.2 in the U.S., but beef it went up like 5 percentage points in like a month, right? It was a real big spike. Yeah. And the reading I did on it was that drought, as you're referenced in 2022, that forced kind of a reduction of herds, which is a euphemism for the killing of animals, I guess. And so it's basic supply and demand now, that it takes a while in the breeding cycle to get the stocks back up. This strikes me, Professor, as similar to when people were freaking out about the prices of eggs and the prices of chicken, that it was essentially avian flu, which led to a massive cull of hens. And again, that just became a supply and demand thing. It was not a direct result of policy.
Well, that's exactly right. And in fact, we didn't have the same avian influenza problems in Canada as they had in the US. So our eggs didn't go up as much as the eggs in the US. They had concentrated farms. We saw them having to cull large numbers of animals. That means, again, they have to replace those birds. Mm-hmm. It takes some time. So demand remained the same and supply went down. Basic Economics 101, the prices went up.
Okay, so if it isn't government tax policy that is causing these increases, can changes to government tax policy cause prices to go down? I mean, the argument leading up to the election was get rid of the consumer carbon tax, prices will fall. The consumer carbon tax has been off the books since April 1, prices are still going up. Now the target is the industrial carbon tax, for which about 97% of emissions on a farm are exempt and protected. I mean, would this make a difference if you got rid of it in reducing prices? Is there a policy lever the government can pull?
Well, I'd like to remember, David, that you and I talked about this before the carbon tax was removed, and we said that the carbon tax was having very little impact on the price of food. Now it's gone. We didn't see an impact as it came off. That's not a surprise. The industrial carbon tax is likely to be very much the same thing. The industrial carbon tax may be affecting some costs on the farm, but the companies in Canada that are subject to it are large emitters, steel, mining, and those sorts of things that aren't as directly related to food production. So again, I think if we got rid of this industrial carbon tax, We might see some prices come down, without a doubt, but I don't think it would have a dramatic impact on food prices.
I've seen an analysis by Trevor Toome and others, who's an economics professor at the University of Calgary, that the entire pollution pricing, carbon tax systems in Canada, it was less than 1% of the increase in food over the spike in period of time, around 0.8%, offset in part by imported cheaper foods. I mean, are we talking that kind of a negligible impact, kind of at the margins of the price increases, not the big things that are driving the shock?
Well, I think Trevor's numbers were around 0.8%. I saw some others from the Bank of Canada that said 0.12%. Whether it's somewhere in between, or even if it's as high as Trevor says, I think what we're seeing is that these aren't the things that are driving the price of food up. The other thing I would highlight is that this might have led to a 0.8% price increase, including the carbon tax, but it hasn't changed in the last 6 months. And so if that tax policy hasn't changed, it's not driving the increase. Might it give us small decreases? Yes, but we'd have to consider what the implications for climate policy would be.
Right. Well, and they'd be one time, right? Like with the elimination of the consumer carbon. It's a one-time thing you can remove. So when you look at this, because none of this, the math on the inputs and the reality and the interconnectedness of tax policy, makes the basket of groceries any cheaper for someone who's having a hard time buying what they need. I mean, what are the things tangibly and immediately any government at any level can do to make food cheaper for people?
Well, government can do almost nothing to bring prices down, because they're doing almost nothing to bring prices up. If the government wanted to give relief to Canadians because of high food prices, other high prices as well, they could do what they did a couple of summers ago, which was give sort of that GST tax credit, which is put money into the pockets of Canadians so that then they would have more to spend on food. But we can't regulate food prices. We can't make the war in Ukraine go away. We can't control extreme weather events, and even the retaliatory tariffs, which are now off, did not have a substantial effect on food prices. So unfortunately, there isn't a lot that the government can do directly.
Okay. Mike Van Massow, Associate Professor in Food Economics at the University of Guelph. Always appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. I wish I had better news.
Thank you. We appreciate it.